This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody. 1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. Thanks for listening. We got a lot to get to today as SMU's picked up 3 transfers since we last spoke. Before we do that, though, got to remind you guys to subscribe to ontheponyexpress.com for just $1 for your first week. SMU Penn State, 11 a.m. Central, Saturday on TNT. But we will be there for you covering it live. Myself, Dean Ralski, will be on the message board chatting with you guys from Happy Valley. So join the fun at On the Pony Express. Speaking of fun, one of our good friends of the show, Mark Villasana, is loving this run for SMU football, and he wants to help you have a little bit more fun when you look at that insurance bill every month. And you can reach out to Mark at 214-352-5656, Northwest Insurance Agency. He's helping you guys find the right insurance coverage for you. We've had some On the Pony Express subscribers or listeners reach out to him and look at your options. You can also email him, markv@nwagencies.com. He's going to fight for you because he's an independent insurance agency. So reach out to him today for your insurance needs. All right. SMU football did get some help and a little bit more fun along the interior for that future outlook with the addition of Addison Nichols. They beat out Florida State for the former Tennessee and Arkansas offensive lineman. He started 10 games for the Razorbacks this past season. And before that, he was at Tennessee where he started his career. And the cool thing is he's originally from Norcross, Georgia. And that draws the connection to Zakai Barker, who just committed Tuesday evening or Wednesday, whatever day it was that Zakai committed. Addison Nichols is from the same hometown as him. And so I don't think there's any more connection than that. They're just from Norcross, Georgia. But like all of SMU's 6 transfers, Addison Nichols has multiple years of eligibility remaining, 2 seasons remaining. He did get some games in on Rocky Top, 13 games before opting to transfer to Arkansas. Sam Pittman on the hot seat, kind of a different situation than maybe he was expecting. Well, he went on the hunt even after starting 10 games this year and came away committed to SMU. And he visited last week. Then he goes on another visit to Florida State and he says, no thanks, Herb Hand. I'm going to go play for Garen Justice. And this is a huge pickup for SMU. 6'5", 320, 330, whatever he's listed at now, a massive human being for the Mustangs. And he did sign with the Mustangs as well. So a big pickup along the interior. You pair him with Josh Bates as the 2 offensive line commits for Garen Justice out of the transfer portal. And all of a sudden, that future looks a lot better with Ja'Kai Clark heading to graduation. He is now out of eligibility. Justin Osborne is as well. Logan Parr announced he's coming back. And SMU is in good shape with those guys coming into the fold. So for SMU to get Addison Nichols, this is a huge recruiting win for the Mustangs, and just goes to show some things maybe not going as well as SMU would like with the transfer portal, but a win over the Florida State Seminoles will definitely get everybody smiling with that pickup. So big win for Garen Justice on the recruiting trail just before heading up to Happy Valley on Friday. Addison Nichols committed just as we wrapped up with our podcast on Wednesday, talking about Joshua Bates and Zakai Barker committing. So we weren't able to fit him in, but SMU will find a way to fit the former 4-star prospect onto their offensive line for the next 2 seasons. No question about that. And he did get somebody in the backfield to block for as well this week as SMU reeled in another Miami transfer. Yes, the pipeline is not all dried up yet. Chris Johnson Jr. committed to the Mustangs after he visited this week. He's originally from Fort Lauderdale, which SMU hopes to be maybe getting down to in a few weeks. But hey, that's looking way ahead. Chris Johnson Jr., though, one of the fastest guys in the country. He won the Florida State 3A 100-meter dash at 10.45 as a junior. Then he won the 200-meter 20.78 as a junior as well. and he anchored a 4x100 team that took tops in the state when he was at Dillard High School. His high school coach compared him to Alvin Kamara. Well, the Miami Hurricanes did not use him like most teams would use Alvin Kamara. He did not play much over his first 2 seasons, but he does have 3 years of eligibility remaining, which completely revamps how you look at this SMU backfield going forward, which is a big, big deal for SMU to get him on board. And I think when you look at what he brings to the table, obviously a ton of speed. He's a former 4-star prospect, and he had 12 appearances this season for Miami in that loaded backfield, 31 rushing yards on 6 carries, so a little more than 5 yards a carry, but did add 8 catches for 72 yards and 2 scores this year. ESPN's Louis Riddick, who's watched a ton of SMU, is really high on him and wants him to see more action. He said when Chris Johnson entered the portal, he said, wherever he lands, use him. He is a game breaker. So don't trust me. Don't trust the SMU staff. Louis Riddick is very, very high on Chris Johnson. And you've got to give kudos to Kyle Cooper and Tyler Foster for the way they've managed this backfield. They obviously did a great job with Brashard Smith this year, but you have veterans like LJ Johnson, Kamar Wheaton, Jalen Knighton with another year of eligibility. Then you go out and you're able to keep a red shirt on Derek McFall. We know the talent level that he brings to the table. And then you sign Jermico Green, who's a 4-star prospect on On3, one of the top backs in the state of Texas. That running back room with those 3, Jermico Green, Chris Johnson Jr., and Derek McFall, that is one hell of a future. All have at least 3 years of eligibility remaining. Of course, Derek and Chris, 3. And then you have the freshman, Jermico Green, with 4. So a really good situation there for SMU moving forward in the running back room. So kudos to those guys for getting it done. When you look at SMU's transfer portal haul, they need defensive linemen, and they got that. But before we get to that, we want to share with you guys a quick message from our friends at Thomas Auto Group, where if you mention on the Pony Express, you can get that last-minute Christmas gift. It's a big one, but you can get employee pricing on pre-owned and new vehicles. So go up 75 to McKinney and check out their dealerships, whether it be Ford, Subaru, and Volkswagen, and they'll get you hooked up with the Thomas Promise.
Jingle all the way over.
Ollie, I need you to take the customers on a tour of our new dealership.
I sure can. Here I go.
Lease the 2024 Crosstrek Premium for just $299 a month, or get 0% financing for 48 months on any 2024 WRX. And during the 2024 Subaru Share the Love event, Subaru is donating $250 with every new Subaru leased or purchased.
Good boy, Ollie. Visit us today at Brandon Thomas Subaru McKinney and BrandonThomasSubaru.com.
All right. Now, before we get to, now that we've got that done, we are going to get to SMU's new addition on the defensive line. He committed and signed with the Mustangs just before the coaching staff got on the bus to head to the airport, and that is Trey Wilson. And if he's a familiar name for you, that is because he's from Garland, Lakeview Centennial. He was a big SMU target down the stretch in his recruitment in 2020, the class of 2023. He spent 2 years in Waco, where he played in, I believe, 25 games. This past year in 2024, he played in 12, 14 tackles, a tackle for loss. For his career, he's listed around 6'3", and he said 270 himself. He has 21 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and a sack the past 2 seasons. When you have Elijah Roberts leaving, when you have talent on the defensive tackle position leaving, you need to add depth. And Trey Wilson's somebody that maybe with 3 years to play 2 seasons could deliver that. And you look at these guys who have come in and worked with Sean Griswold, maybe it's a great situation that he finds a little bit more confidence. Maybe they bulk him up. Maybe he is a light defensive tackle that can kind of be like a Jared Harrison Hunt. Maybe he is a very key contributor behind Cam Robertson, who's expected to be a star next year at that strong side defensive end spot. But he's kind of a tweener in a sense. He could stick around that weight and maybe be a strong side defensive end. He could play a little defensive tackle. But when you have that type of versatility, that's something that SMU will always take when it comes to pulling in guys that can help them, because, look, it's hard out there in that defensive lineman world right now. It is not fun to try and recruit with some of the money being thrown around. But SMU gets a guy from Dallas to come home. That's something you'll always take. So now SMU has 6 transfers on board. They are sitting in a good situation, and they've kind of come in spurts. They started off kind of hot with flipping Chasen Johnson from USC, the defensive back who's going to be a key starter for multiple years for SMU. Zakai Barker has 2 years left. He's going to start at linebacker in all likelihood next year, next to Alex Kilgore, who's back. Joshua Bates, who is a depth, maybe he has a career trajectory like Logan Parr and comes in and pushes somebody and starts at guard with Justin Osborne out the door. But now you've got 6. We talked about the 3 on this podcast, but we're going to close out with kind of what's next. And I do want to touch on one defensive line prospect to start things out that is visiting Oklahoma this weekend, and that is Wisconsin defensive lineman James Thompson Jr. He was a starter for the Badgers for multiple years. He did not play last year due to an injury, so he is getting back to it. But he's been among the most productive players for the Badgers over the last couple of years. Before that, SMU did host him for a visit. Tennessee's had him on campus. A bunch of programs have been working to get him on campus. He's expected at Oklahoma. This is one where right now I don't know how to feel about SMU's chances, but when you start taking these bigger visits, it is always interesting. Obviously, we saw Addison Nichols still signed with SMU, and that was a huge get, a 4-star transfer addition, even though he, went to Florida State for a visit. But when you look at some of these other players, especially the defensive linemen, it's so competitive out there. And speaking of one that it just got more interesting for, Bear Alexander, the big defensive tackle from USC, is at Oregon. And I do want to just kind of provide context, I guess, for this one, because look, it is so hard to track the comings and goings of transfers and who's going to take. And when SMU had Bear Alexander on campus, he was maybe not a take for some of these programs around the country. Maybe he wasn't somebody that SMU was going to really have to fight tooth and nail for, but we knew he was going to visit Penn State. We knew Penn State was probably going to make a run at him. And at the same time, you have somebody that is uber talented who's also going to, potentially cost a pretty penny if other teams start to press. And that's where it's going to be interesting in this one, because Oregon has so much money. They don't necessarily have anything to lose by spending that type of money on a player like Bear Alexander. If they feel like he's checked all the boxes, there's a lot of familiarity with Bear and Oregon. It was one of his schools that was definitely recruiting him over the last couple of years. So for SMU, they're going to try to weather the storm here. We'll see. But I'll say this, look, SMU hosted him, but I never got the sense that they were all in. And I'm not saying that they've passed either. And that's just kind of the weird line to walk with transfers, right? Like, it's usually pretty cut and dry when it comes to high school recruiting. It's usually very straightforward. Transfer is not as much. And we know the red flags, but we also know the productivity of Bear Alexander. And I'm here to tell you that there's not a consensus from people that I talk to around SMU about what would have been the right thing to do here. And that's the hardest part, is you can't sacrifice culture. You can't sacrifice, all the things that SMU has built on the defensive line for one guy, even if it's at a position of need. And I just truthfully think SMU's done a really good job of balancing all of those things with the transfer portal, that they're not going to give it up for one guy. And so if Bear Alexander does in fact, commit to Oregon or commit to Penn State, I'm here to tell you that SMU is going to keep swinging away at other guys. And they've got multiple transfer defensive linemen that I'm told are expected on campus. It is sometimes hard to cover transfer portal defensive line recruiting right now, because I can tell you this, it is incredibly tight-lipped because of how competitive it is. And that's something that shouldn't necessarily be forgotten when kind of trying to find information. But I don't know where SMU goes on the defensive line and who they get. I'm confident they get at least one this cycle in the December-January run. I just feel good enough about it. based on what I've heard. And we'll find out who that is. But right now, Bear Alexander is at Oregon. He did pick up a prediction to land with the Ducks. And so we'll see if that comes to fruition. But what we do have we do have to look forward to is Saturday, 11 a.m. Central on TNT. SMU takes on Penn State in Beaver Stadium. Unbelievable. Hope you guys really enjoy it. I hope you guys enjoyed this relatively short podcast, but did want to get you guys one before the weekend on these transfer editions. So without anything else to say, signing off. SMU, by the way, takes on Boston College tomorrow in hoops at 11 a.m. Central too. And shout out the volleyball coach, Sam Erger, who picked up a contract extension. Well-deserved one there. So hope you guys have a great weekend. Enjoy SMU Penn State. Subscribe to ontheponyexpress.com. We'll catch you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU_on3 and on Instagram at On3SMU. And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.